White Silence 2 by Solomon North. Chapter 1. Thaw. The snow did not melt all at once. It let go in pieces. Joren noticed it first in the sound. Water, somewhere nearby. Thin, irregular, wrong. For years the world had made only two noises, wind and their own breathing. Now there was a third, and it made him stop walking. They stood on the ridge above the town, the three of them outlined against a sky so blue it felt obscene. Vera shielded her eyes with a gloved hand, though the gloves were no longer necessary. Kian didn't bother. He stared openly as if daring the light to explain itself. Below them rooftops emerged like old bones, streets cut through the white in dark, wet lines. Ice hung from signs, dripping steadily, counting time again. It shouldn't be this warm, Vera said. She had said it every morning for a week. Joren didn't answer. He was watching a crow hop along a telephone wire, its black feathers clean against the brightness. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen an animal that wasn't starving or dead. Kian laughed quietly. Not happy, not afraid, just disbelieving. So this is it, he said. The end of the end. They walked down into the town, boots sinking into slush that soaked through old seams. The air smelled like wet metal and pine sap and something faintly sweet. Rot returning to the world. Inside a grocery store with its front windows blown out by ice, sunlight spilled across empty shelves. A single can lay on the floor, rusted through, its label long gone. Vera picked it up anyway, turned it in her hands like it might speak. "Do you think anyone else made it?" she asked. The question hovered. None of them touched it. They had learned during the cold years that hope was heavier than despair. Hope made you walk farther than your legs could handle. Hope made you call names into the wind until your throat bled. Joren finally said, "If they did, they'll come looking when the silence breaks." Outside, the crow took off, wings cutting the air. The sound followed them, sharp and alive. For the first time since the freeze, the world felt awake, and that terrified him more than the cold ever had. Chapter 2. What the Sun Reveals. They slept in the fire station because it had walls thick enough to remember warmth. The trucks inside were frozen in place, tires half sunk into concrete where meltwater had pooled and refrozen weeks ago. Now the floor was wet again. Vera laid their bedrolls in a line beneath the old metal lockers, the paint flaking like dried skin. Kian found a manual crank radio and turned it uselessly, just to hear the static scrape the air. Joren stood watch by the open bay doors until the sun dipped low and orange, stretching shadows across the street like reaching fingers. They had learned routines during the cold years. Wake, count supplies, move before the light failed. Back then the sun was a rumor. Now it lingered too long, hanging above the horizon, as if reluctant to leave. That night, Joren dreamed of ice cracking beneath his feet. Not breaking, just whispering. He woke to birdsong. The sound punched the breath from his lungs. He sat upright, heart racing, hand already reaching for the knife that wasn't there anymore. For a moment he didn't know where he was. The world felt wrong, too soft, too open. The birds were outside, several of them. Vera was awake too, sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, listening as if to music she couldn't decide she liked. Kian lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, lips curved into something almost like a smile. "Well," Kian said quietly, "that's new." They ate sparingly. Old habits died slowly. Even now, with meltwater running freely and plant shoots pushing through cracks in the pavement, none of them trusted abundance. The cold had taught them that generosity was a lie the world told before taking everything back. They searched the town methodically. Houses stood open where ice expansion had burst doors from frames. Inside, furniture was warped, photographs stuck together in damp clumps. Joren tried not to look at faces. They all blurred together after a while. People caught mid-laugh, mid-gesture, forever unaware of the silence that would swallow them. Vera lingered in a library whose roof had partially collapsed. Sunlight speared through the hole, illuminating floating dust and a circle of green where moss had already begun reclaiming the floor. "Stories survived," she said, running her fingers over swollen spines. "People didn't." Kian shrugged. "Stories always do. They don't need heat. Outside, they found tracks, not old ones, not half-buried ghosts from before the freeze. Fresh." Joren crouched, pressing 2 fingers into the wet earth. A boot print, deep heel, purposeful stride. Vera swore under her breath. They followed the tracks to the edge of town, where the road bent toward the hills. There, something else waited. A field once buried under meters of snow, now exposed and littered with debris carried by meltwater. In the center stood a wind turbine, long dead, its blades locked in place by rust. Beneath it, someone had stacked stones into a crude marker. No name, no dates, just a symbol carved into the top rock, 3 lines crossing a circle. Kian stared at it too long. "I've seen that before," he said finally. Vera turned sharply. "When?" He tried to remember, but couldn't. Thought it was just nothing. Someone passing time. Joren felt the sun on his neck, warm and heavy. "We weren't the only ones," he said. The realization settled between them. Not relief, not fear, but something sharper. Responsibility, maybe, or consequence. They left the marker untouched. That afternoon, clouds gathered for the first time since the thaw. Not the violent, rolling kind, just thin veils drifting lazily across the sky. Shadows softened, the light dulled. With it came the smell. Rot stronger now, sweet and thick. Life returning too fast, consuming what the cold had preserved. Joren gagged and turned away. Vera covered her mouth. Kian laughed once, then stopped. "Sun's not mercy," Kian said. "It's exposure." They made camp on the outskirts, where trees stood in uneven rows, bark split from years of contraction and expansion. As night fell, insects emerged, tentative, humming, testing the air. Joren took first watch again. In the distance, something moved. Not close, not threatening, but deliberate. He didn't call out. The silence had changed. It was no longer white. It had edges now, and somewhere beyond the hills, something else was waking up too. Chapter 3. Voices in the Open. They followed the river because it had returned with confidence. During the cold years, it had been a rumor beneath the ice. Now it ran wide and loud, swollen with meltwater, carrying branches, scraps of metal, a child's plastic sled cracked clean in half. Kian walked closest to the bank, using a bent spear as a walking stick. Vera stayed back, scanning the tree line. Joren took the rear, counting footsteps without meaning to. The sound of water made conversation difficult. That was fine. Words had grown heavier since the thaw. They found the camp just before noon. It was empty. A fire ring, stones blackened but dry. A tarp stretched between 2 trees, sagging in the middle where water had pooled. Someone had been careful. Too careful. Supplies were packed cleanly, no waste left behind. Whoever had stayed here expected to return, or didn't believe in leaving evidence of themselves. Vera crouched, touching the ash. "Recent," she said. Joren nodded. The sun warmed his shoulders, but his hands were cold. Kian circled the perimeter, stopping at a tree marked with the same symbol they'd seen beneath the turbine. 3 lines crossing a circle. This one was carved deeper, older. The bark around it had begun to heal. "They've been here a while," Kian said, watching. As if in answer, a voice carried across the river. Not a shout, not a call. A sentence. They froze. It came again, low, measured, distorted by moving water. Joren couldn't make out the words, only the shape of them. Human cadence, controlled breath. Vera stood slowly. "Don't answer," she whispered. Kian smiled without humor. Too late for that. The voice stopped. Silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It pressed in from all sides, filled with expectation. Minutes passed, then movement, across the river near the reeds. A figure stepped into view, hands raised, unarmed. Sunlight caught on wet fabric and pale skin. A woman, younger than Joren expected, hair cut short, eyes sharp. "I can see you," she said, clear this time. "I don't want to walk closer." Neither did they. "We're not looking for trouble," Vera called back. The woman tilted her head. "No one ever is." From the tree line behind her, two more shapes emerged, one tall, one hunched. Neither raised their hands. Joren felt the old instincts rise, measure distance, count threats, plan exits. The cold had trained him well. "We're just passing through," Kian said. His voice was light, but his stance wasn't. "Didn't know anyone else was around." "That's the point," the woman replied. "You're loud." The word landed harder than an accusation. "We'll leave," Vera said quickly. The woman studied them one by one. Her gaze lingered on Kian, then softened slightly when it reached Vera. "Everyone says that," she said. "Few do." A bird cried out overhead. Somewhere downstream, something large splashed. Finally, the woman lowered her hands. "You can camp upriver? One night? Then you move on." "And if we don't?" Kian asked. Her smile was small and tired. "Then the sun won't be the worst thing you face." They didn't argue. As they turned away, Joren glanced back once. The woman was already retreating, disappearing into the green as if she'd never been there at all. They walked until dusk without speaking. That night, camped far upriver, Vera broke the silence. "They survived by staying hidden," she said, "by staying quiet." Kian stared into the fire. "So did we." Joren listened to the river, louder now, unstoppable. The world was awake, and it was already deciding who belonged in the noise. Chapter 4. Old Cold Rules. They woke to smoke that wasn't theirs. It crept low along the riverbank, thin and deliberate, the kind made by someone who knew how to hide a fire without smothering it. Joren was on his feet instantly, heart pounding, the old cold panic flooding back. Move or die. Vera grabbed his arm. "Wait." The smoke wasn't coming closer. It was drifting away. They followed it. The camp sat in a shallow dip beyond the bend of the river, hidden from casual sight, but open enough to breathe. A man knelt beside the fire, hands shaking as he fed it twigs. He looked up when he saw them and flinched hard enough to fall backward. "Please," he said before any of them spoke. "I don't have anything worth taking." He was young, or maybe just thin enough to seem it. His jacket hung loose, eyes sunken, lips cracked. A pack lay open beside him, nearly empty. Vera knelt slowly, palms open. "We're not here for that." The man laughed, sharp and broken. "That's what the others said, too." Kian circled behind him, eyes scanning the trees. "You alone?" The man nodded too quickly. "Yes. I swear." Joren didn't believe him. He also didn't care. They learned his name was Thomas. He had come from the south following rumors of green valleys and running water. His group, 5 people, had splintered during the thaw. Arguments over food, over direction, over whether the sun meant salvation or exposure. "They took everything when they left," Thomas said, staring into the fire. "Said I slowed them down." Vera clenched her jaw. She reached into her pack and pulled out a wrapped ration. Kian caught her wrist. "No," he said quietly. She turned on him. "He'll die." "So might we," Kian replied. "You don't know him." Joren watched Tomas watch them. The man's eyes flicked between Vera's hands and Kian's face. calculating, not cruel, just desperate. Old rules surfaced like scars: never split supplies, never trust a lone survivor, never stay visible. The cold had kept them alive by making them small and hard. Vera tore the ration open anyway and placed it in front of Thomas. He hesitated, then devoured it like it might vanish if he looked away. Kian swore under his breath. "Where are the others now?" Joren asked. Thomas wiped his mouth. "North, toward the hills. They found something." "What kind of something?" Kian pressed. "A place that stays warm at night," Thomas said, "even when the sun's gone." Silence fell. Vera's eyes met Joren's. Hope flared, and fear with it. Kian shook his head slowly. "That's bait." "Or it's the future," Vera said. Joren stood. They argued in low voices a short distance away, Thomas pretending not to listen while listening to everything. If they helped him, they risked being followed. If they left him, they became the people who abandoned the weak the moment survival stopped being abstract. If they followed him north, they stepped into someone else's territory. The sun climbed higher, warm and indifferent. In the end, the choice was small, and that made it worse. They gave Thomas a knife, a direction, one more ration. They did not let him join them. Vera cried quietly after he left, shoulders shaking without sound. Kian didn't look back. Joren watched the man disappear into the trees, a lone figure swallowed by green instead of white. That night, Joren couldn't sleep. He kept hearing Thomas's voice, a place that stays warm, echoing against the memory of the woman by the river, warning them they were loud. The thaw had changed the rules. They had chosen to follow the old ones anyway. And somewhere north, the consequences were already moving. Chapter 5. The Markers. They found the first marker before noon. It stood where the forest thinned into a wide clearing, stones stacked carefully into a waist-high pillar. Moss crept along its base, fed by constant damp. At the top, the familiar symbol was carved deep and clean, 3 lines crossing a circle. This one had offerings: a strip of cloth tied neatly around the stones, a rusted spoon placed flat at the base, a small bundle of dried leaves bound with twine. Vera stopped short. "This isn't just territory." "No," Joren said. "It's belief." They found more as the day stretched on. Markers at crossroads, at river bends, at the edge of a collapsed bridge. Always the same symbol. Always something left behind. Not random, not careless. Kian crouched at one, examining the ground. "They stop here, regularly. This isn't fear." He stood. "It's routine." The forest felt different now, not hostile but claimed. They moved slower. By late afternoon, they reached the hills Thomas had spoken of. The land rose gently, dotted with boulders freed from ice. Grass pushed up everywhere, bright and aggressive, as if making up for lost time. Heat shimmered faintly above dark stone. And then they felt it. Warmth, not sunlight, something steadier, ground deep. Vera dropped to her knees, pressing her palm to the earth. "It's real." A structure waited ahead, half buried in the slope. An old service facility, maybe, concrete thick and scarred. Vents lined its sides, open and breathing faint steam. A door stood ajar, voices drifted out. Not hushed, not hidden. A community. Joren's chest tightened. Sound layered on sound, footsteps, laughter, the scrape of metal, the unmistakable cadence of people no longer whispering to survive. Before they could decide, someone spotted them. A man stepped into the doorway, hand raised, not in threat, not in welcome. Assessment. Behind him, others gathered. The woman from the river emerged last. Her eyes found them immediately. "I told you to move on," she said. Kian lifted his hands. "We did, we just kept moving." She studied them, then nodded once. "That's how it happens." They were led inside. The interior was warmer than any place Joren had felt in years. Generators hummed low. Heat lamps glowed. People moved with purpose, unafraid of being seen. On the far wall, the symbol was painted large and white. Vera swallowed. What does it mean? The woman followed her gaze. It reminds us, she said. The freeze happened because the world was too loud. Kian stiffened. That's not true. Isn't it? The woman replied. Factories, power grids, heat without restraint. The cold was correction. Joren felt the weight of the room shift. You're saying the freeze was necessary, Vera said. I'm saying it was a warning, the woman answered. The sun is not forgiveness. It's a second chance. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Joren understood then. This wasn't just shelter. It was doctrine. We keep our numbers low, the woman continued. We mark our paths so we remember where not to grow. No cities, no excess, no noise. Kian laughed once, sharp. You're building rules again. We're preventing collapse, she said. Outside, a child ran past the open door, laughing freely. The sound made Joren flinch. They were offered food, warmth, a place to stay. All it would cost was agreement. That night, lying on a borrowed mat, Joren stared at the ceiling and understood the true shape of the choice before them. Join the quiet and survive, or leave and risk becoming the reason the world ends twice. Chapter 6. Splintering morning came softly in the warm place. Light filtered through narrow windows, diffused and steady. No frost, no breath fogging the air. Joren woke disoriented, his body slow to accept that nothing hurt from the cold. That alone felt dangerous. Vera was already awake, sitting near the doorway, watching people move through the corridor beyond. They spoke openly. Someone laughed. Someone argued about tools. Life, unafraid. Kian lay on his side, facing the wall. They ate together without speaking. Later, the woman, her name was Iria, walked them through the facility. She spoke calmly, like someone explaining gravity. The heat came from the earth itself. Old geothermal lines rerouted, stripped down, controlled. Enough to keep people alive, not enough to let them forget what had happened. We don't expand, Iria said. We don't attract. The markers aren't warnings, they're promises. Vera touched the painted symbol on the wall. And if someone doesn't agree? They leave, Iria said, or they're asked to be quiet. The words sat there. Quiet. They were given the afternoon to decide. Kian didn't wait. This is a cult, he said as soon as they were alone. Soft words, hard edges. They're alive, Vera shot back. They have heat, children, a future. A leash, Kian said. You don't hear it because you're tired. Vera's voice broke. I am tired. Joren stood between them, hands useless at his sides. That night the argument turned sharper. Vera wanted to stay, at least for a season. Learn. Rest. She believed the world needed limits now. That survival without restraint had nearly killed everything. Kian wanted out by morning. He'd seen rules harden into cruelty before. He'd rather face the wild than live under permission. They both looked to Joren. He felt the weight of every winter press into his spine. I don't know, he said. The answer satisfied no one. In the early hours before dawn, Joren woke to movement. Kian was packing quietly. You're leaving, Joren said. Kian didn't deny it. You're coming with me. Joren hesitated. Behind them, the warm place breathed steadily. Ahead, the thawed world waited, wide, dangerous, honest. Vera appeared in the doorway, eyes red but dry. If you go, she said, don't come back loud. Kian shouldered his pack. If I stay, I'll forget how to speak at all. Joren stepped forward, then stopped. The moment stretched, thin, fragile. Finally, Joren handed Kian the knife they'd given Thomas. Kian took it. Their hands lingered. "Don't make the world small," Kian said. "Don't burn it down," Joren replied. Kian left before the sun rose. Vera turned away. Joren stood alone between warmth and wilderness, knowing the thaw had finally taken something it would not return. 3 survived the cold. Only 2 remained together. And silence once broken does not mend cleanly. Chapter 7. The Cost of Warmth. The heat was everywhere, not just from the lamps or the floors or the hidden geothermal vents, but in the air itself. Every breath drew it in, heavy, thick, demanding. Joren could feel it in his chest, in his limbs, like the world was pressing him into the ground. Vera moved quietly beside him through the corridors, carrying a tray of food. She kept her eyes down, but her fingers trembled. She hadn't spoken since Kian left. "They're organized," she said finally. "Every person has a role. Every task matters. No one wastes time." Joren nodded. He couldn't deny it. Compared to wandering frozen ruins, compared to scraping a living from ice and snow, this place was paradise. But it cost something, something heavy and unseen. By midday, they were summoned to Arya's office. The woman gestured to the map on the wall, pins and markers dotted across the thawed territory. "You understand why we limit ourselves," Arya said. "Why expansion is dangerous. The world only gives second chances to those who remember what came before." Vera traced a finger over one of the pins. "And what about people outside, survivors like Thomas?" Arya's lips tightened. "They will find their way, or they won't. The world is not our responsibility beyond these walls. Only what we can hold, only what we can sustain is ours to guide." Vera's hands curled into fists. She understood. And she didn't. That night in the dormitory, she whispered, "Joren, I'm not sure I can do this." Joren lay on the narrow mat beside her, listening to the hum of machinery, the distant shuffle of feet in the hall. "I know. It feels like obedience." "Not obedience." Joren's voice was low. "Survival with rules. Rules we didn't write, rules that save lives." "But at what cost?" Vera said. "We can eat. We're warm. But we're quieter, smaller, complicit." Joren turned onto his side. "Kian would call it cowardice. And yet," Vera's voice faltered, "we're alive, and maybe that's the only way we stay that way." The next morning, they joined others in tending the geothermal vents. Children ran past, laughing freely, unharmed, a sound almost unreal after years of frost. Farmers harvested shallow gardens, engineers maintained delicate conduits of steam. Every movement, every breath reminded them that staying meant more than survival. It demanded participation, conformity, sacrifice. By midday, Vera realized the first cost had already been exacted. Her hands ached from repetitive labor. Her mind ached from waiting, from watching, from the constant hum that left no room for the cold thoughts she had once relied on. Joren's gaze lingered on her, unspoken, understanding the weight they both carried. That evening, Iria approached them. "A choice will come soon," she said. "A test of loyalty, a small thing or a great one. Be ready. We survive together, or we are nothing." Joren felt the pull in his chest, the same one he had felt when Kian left. The warmth was a promise, but it had a price, and he could already see it taking shape. Outside, the sun dipped low. The thawed world glowed soft and deceptive. Life had returned, and with it, new rules, new costs, and new shadows waiting quietly behind the light. Chapter 8. No more silence. The alarms were soft at first, a low hum, barely audible over the constant heat machinery. Joren woke to it, heart tight in his chest. Vera was already awake, staring at the ceiling, listening. "Something's wrong," she whispered. They dressed quickly, moving through the dormitory where the others were stirring, but calm, obediently. The hum became a pulse, and then a low vibration through the floors. Iria met them outside. Her face was calm, trained, almost serene. "It's Thomas," she said. Joren froze. "What do you mean?" "He returned," Iria explained, "with others. He didn't heed the markers, didn't follow our rules. He's bringing outsiders." Vera's stomach turned. "How many?" "Enough," Iria said, "to overwhelm us if we hesitate." They moved to the perimeter quickly. Outside, the sun was bright and unforgiving, throwing long shadows across the hilltop. Figures approached, dozens, maybe more, weaving through trees with purpose. "They're desperate," Vera said. "Hungry, scared. They've survived the thaw as we did." "Yes," Iria said, "and we will show them why we survived together." Joren felt the old cold rise, sharper now than any warmth. The instincts Kian had mocked, the counting of footsteps, the measuring of distance, came back fully. Vera looked at him, eyes wide. "We can't." "You have to," Joren said. His voice was low, trembling. "I have to." The first few arrived at the perimeter. Thomas among them, gaunt but alive, shoulders tense with expectation. He looked at Joren and Vera, recognition and fear mingling in his gaze. Iria raised her hand. A command, not a greeting. The newcomers faltered, hunger and hope warring with caution. "Bring them in," Joren said. Vera stared. "We can't." "You will," Joren said, the words tasting like ice and fire at once. "If you don't, they'll die out there. And if we don't, this place, our survival, dies too." One by one, the newcomers were led inside. They were dirty, wary, fearful. Some spoke, most were silent. The rules were invisible but understood immediately. By nightfall, the dormitories were crowded. Supplies stretched thinner. The warmth became uneven, machines groaning under the weight. Children cried, parents argued quietly. Someone tried to sneak outside and was stopped by Iria. Vera sat alone for a long time, hands pressed to her temples. "We brought this on ourselves," she whispered. Joren joined her. "We saved them." "They're alive," she said. "But this isn't safe, not really. Not for us, not for anyone." He didn't answer. He felt it already, the first fracture of the world inside this place. The cost of warmth was no longer theoretical. It was here, tangible, claiming ground inside their hearts. And somewhere in the dormitory, Thomas watched them. Not with gratitude, not with fear, but with a quiet understanding. The thaw had returned life, yes, but it had also returned choice, and with it, the weight of survival. Silence had ended, and the noise that followed would demand everything they had. Chapter 9. What Remains. The night was thick, unbroken, even under artificial light. Vera sat on the floor near the central hearth, knees drawn to her chest, staring at nothing. Around her, the dormitory hummed with soft voices, children coughing, machinery creaking, someone crying quietly in the far corner. It was alive, but it was heavy. Joren stood by the doorway, hands stuffed in his pockets. He watched her, but didn't speak. Words were useless now. They had survived the cold by relying on instinct and discipline. But the thaw had taught him something harsher. Survival carried a weight that even obedience could not lift. "They're alive," Vera whispered again, as if saying it out loud might somehow make it true, or maybe make it false. "We saved them. We did what we were supposed to. And yet—" Joren stepped closer, crouching beside her. "And yet, the cost," she said. Her voice broke. "The cost is everything we thought we were saving for ourselves, for Kian, for each other, for me. It doesn't matter. It's gone." He didn't answer. He felt it too, the quiet fracture in their hearts, the tension that had stretched thin during the day, now snapping quietly in corners they couldn't see. Outside, the first stars began to pierce the sky. Joren went to the edge of the facility and looked back toward the hills, toward the path Kian had taken. He imagined him walking alone, the thawed world open, dangerous and free. Part of him ached, and part of him envied the solitude. Vera joined him. Her hand brushed his briefly, hesitant, seeking reassurance that neither of them could provide. "They'll be fine," he said softly, almost to himself. "Will we?" she asked. He did not answer. Inside, the newcomers slept uneasily. Thomas lay on a thin mat in the corner, silent, watching. He had changed. The desperation that had marked him when they first met was tempered now by something else. Awareness, understanding. The cost of warmth wasn't abstract anymore. It had a face. Joren realized then that it had a face for them too. Vera's, his own, Kian's. The warmth of the place, the rule-bound comfort, the safety. It was conditional, fragile, and measured. Every act of kindness, every rule followed, every decision to save life came at the expense of something vital. Freedom, innocence, choice. They would survive, but survival alone would not be enough. The dawn was slow. Sunlight filtered across the dormitory floor. Children stirred, voices soft but persistent. Machines hummed, carrying heat through pipes and vents. The facility breathed, unstoppable, indifferent, precise. Joren took Vera's hand. They did not speak, did not need to. Their fingers entwined with a quiet agreement. They would endure, they would live, but the world inside would never be the same. Outside, the thawed world waited, open, alive, and unforgiving. And somewhere far north, Kian walked alone, carrying the memory of the cold and the knowledge that freedom had its own cost. In the warm place, what remained was survival, morality stretched thin, and the quiet realization that the thaw had not returned life. It had returned consequence. Chapter 10. The world keeps going. The warmth was relentless. Outside the facility, sunlight hit everything at once, painting the hills in gold and green. Shadows shortened, then stretched again as the day moved. Birds flitted between trees. Water ran unchecked in streams that had once been icebound. Life was returning in a surge that was beautiful and merciless. Joren stood at the edge of the perimeter, watching. Vera joined him silently, carrying a basket of supplies for those in the dormitories. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. From the hills, smoke curled faintly. Tomas's group had moved on. They were alive, somewhere beyond sight. Joren imagined them navigating the thawed wilderness, making mistakes, surviving, or not. And in the same instant he realized he did not care whether they succeeded or failed. They had chosen their own cost, just as he and Vera had chosen theirs. Inside the facility, Iria moved like a shadow through the rooms, inspecting, observing, teaching. Her presence reminded Joren that rules were not suggestions. They were survival. They were authority. They were invisible, yet heavier than stone. Vera approached him again, voice quiet. "Do you ever think about Kian?" "Every day," Joren admitted. "I imagine him walking the thawed world alone, free, dangerous, honest." "He's alive," Vera said. "That's enough." Joren didn't answer. Survival was enough. Sometimes. But survival carried weight. He felt it pressing against his ribs, a constant reminder that life in the thawed world was not simple. That choice, freedom, morality, all of it, was a currency too expensive to spend lightly. They spent the day tending the newcomers, teaching them the ways of the warm place. Some listened, some resisted. Resistance was met with patience, then firm boundaries. Joren realized that each act, however small, was shaping the future, shaping lives, shaping morality. By evening, the facility seemed almost serene. Children played near the vents, laughter ringing like fragile glass. Adults prepared food, repaired tools, maintained the infrastructure. Life moved forward. And yet, Joren could not forget the river, the hills, the freedom Kian had chosen. He thought of the markers, of the silent watchers, of the world beyond the controlled warmth. The thawed world moved on, indifferent to those who clung to survival. It was alive, chaotic, unstoppable, and in its wake it demanded that each choice, each compromise, each act of preservation be weighed against consequence. Vera stood beside him, fingers entwined with his. "We're part of it now," she said. "Yes," he replied, "but it's not just us. The world moves, whether we approve or not. We survive, yes, but we also decide what remains." The sun dipped low over the hills, casting long, uneven shadows across the land. Somewhere far away, Kian walked. Somewhere else, Tomas's group stumbled through the forests. And here, in the warm place, Joren and Vera bore witness to the fact that survival alone did not guarantee peace, morality, or truth. The world kept going, and it would not wait for them. Chapter 11. White Silence. The facility was quiet, not asleep quiet, not the hum of machines quiet, but a different quiet, one that pressed on the mind. Vera sat by a window, watching sunlight streak across the hills, the thawed world alive beyond glass. Children laughed softly in the distance, but their voices felt like echoes from another life. Joren joined her, leaning against the frame. He didn't speak. Words were unnecessary here. "I can feel it," Vera said finally. "The cold, it's gone. But the silence, it's still here. Different, though. It's ours now." Joren nodded slowly. "It isn't emptiness anymore. It's weight, responsibility, memory." They thought of Kian, walking alone through the thawed forests, unbound by rules, carrying the past and its scars. They thought of Thomas, who had moved on, choices shaping the ripples of consequence. And they thought of themselves, bound by warmth, comfort, and survival, but shackled by the decisions they had made. "The silence," Vera whispered, "isn't white. It's layered. There are voices beneath it, footsteps, mistakes. We can hear them if we listen." Joren felt it then, fully. Every decision, every act of restraint, every compromise, they had carved the edges of this silence. The thaw had returned life, yes, but life carried judgment, and the quiet now was alive with it. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Somewhere beyond the hills, water gurgled in streams unbound by ice. The thawed world continued, vast, indifferent, and relentless. And within it their choices stood like stones in a riverbed, immovable, shaping the currents, impossible to ignore. Vera's hand brushed his. "We've survived the cold," she said softly. "And we've survived the thaw. But at what cost?" Joren looked out over the hills, sunlight warm on his face. "At the cost of silence that isn't empty anymore, silence we carry." They stayed like that until the sun dipped low, painting the hills golden shadow. The world beyond was alive, moving, unpredictable, and in the warmth, in the quiet weight of survival, Joren and Vera understood something profound. The silence they had endured in the frozen world was not gone. It had returned, reshaped, layered with memory, choice, and consequence. The cold had taught them survival. The thaw had taught them meaning. And white silence, whatever it had been before, was now their inheritance. Chapter 12. Sunset Without Ice. The last light of day stretched across the hills, painting the thawed world in gold and shadow. Joren stood at the edge of the facility, watching sunlight scatter across the trees and streams. He felt the warmth in his chest, heavy, permanent, yet insistent. The world had returned, not the same as before, not safe, not quiet, but alive, undeniable. Vera joined him, silent at first. Then she spoke, voice soft but steady. We've survived everything. The cold, the thaw, the choices. But nothing we did erased what's been lost. Joren nodded. We carry it. Every name, every step, every silence. Even Kian, even Thomas, even ourselves. Somewhere far beyond the hills, a crow cawed. A sharp reminder that life was moving, indifferent to morality, survival, or regret. The facility hummed behind them, warmth, life, order. Inside, children slept, adults moved quietly, obediently, safely. Outside, the thawed forests and rivers stretched endlessly, beautiful, dangerous, alive. Vera's eyes glinted in the dying sunlight. Do you ever wonder if we chose wrong? Every day, Joren said, but we survived. We kept what mattered alive. That's all we could do. The wind shifted. A branch snapped somewhere in the distance. The world was moving. It was beyond control. They thought of Kian, alone in the wilderness, free in a way they could never be. They thought of Thomas and his group, carving their own fragile paths. And they thought of themselves, bound by warmth, morality, and consequence, but still standing. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long. For the first time in years, Joren felt the full weight of silence, not empty, not frozen, not forgiving, but alive. Vera pressed her hand to his. We're still here, she said. Yes, Joren replied, and the world keeps going. They watched the sunset together. Warm light spilled across the hills, golden and relentless, washing over the forests, rivers, and stone markers. Life moved forward, and in the quiet, layered with memory, choice, and consequence, they understood the truth. Survival was not the same as freedom. Warmth did not erase cost, and silence, white silence, was never empty. It had only changed, and they were the ones left to carry it.